Thank you for choosing American Pest CEUs. Hi, I'm Sean Reeves. I'm an Associate Certified Entomologist with American Pest CEUs. I've been in the pest management industry since 1999, and I'll be your instructor for today's course. Today's course was compiled by Jack Launius, who has served in the pest management industry since 1990. Chapter 10, Planning Your Pesticide Application or Making Your Plan. After studying this chapter, you should be able to explain how to select appropriate pesticides and additives if needed, follow all label instructions and other legal restrictions pertaining to a pesticide application, determine whether 2 or more pesticides may be tank mixed, follow the label for safe mixing and loading, describe how to prevent pesticide contamination of water sources during mixing, loading, and cleaning. Also, after studying this chapter, you should be able to list what personal protective equipment to wear during mixing, loading, and cleaning, explain how to open pesticide containers and transfer the contents safely, measure pesticides accurately using proper utensils and devices, discuss how to rinse and dispose of pesticide containers properly, state some basic procedures that ensure the correct application of pesticides, describe how to clean and properly store application equipment after use, explain the basics of professionalism for pesticide applicators. Now, I think many of you understand you have to plan anything you're going to do in life. Making a pesticide application isn't going to be any different. Planning is essential before beginning a pesticide application. To help plan, you should know how to select the right pesticide for the job, review the label, test for pesticide compatibility before mixing, choose what personal protective equipment to wear, transfer pesticides safely, clean up after an application. Careful planning and consideration of all details is the hallmark of professionalism. Let's talk a little more about some of the steps in planning when it comes to a pesticide application. We always have to make sure we select the right pesticide for the job. So obviously, as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of things that go into that. Inspections, identifications, and things like that are all helpful in making sure we do select the right pesticide for the job. Now, we're also going to need to review the label as we talked about before. If you don't review the pesticide label, you're going to have no idea what it can be used for, how to use it, where you can put it, what the mix rate is. There's just so many things that comes along with reviewing the label. As you all know, the label is the law, so we have to follow that label. We need to test for pesticide compatibility before mixing. You do not want to mix products together that are not compatible. You have to make sure if you're dealing with 2 different formulations, before you mix them together, please make sure they're compatible. You never want to use 2 products that aren't compatible because you're going to have a mess with those 2 pesticides being mixed together. We have to choose what personal protective equipment to wear. Safety is number 1. It's imperative that we protect ourselves and others around us. Always choose what personal protective equipment to wear by reading that label and understanding what's required. When it comes to the transfer of pesticides safely, you have to understand you're taking pesticides, say from your office, out into the field. You're transferring them in a vehicle. We have to make sure that transfer is a smooth and safe process. We have to make sure those pesticides are not leaking, spilling, dripping, or anything like that. So just make sure you're really up to par on transferring pesticides safely. And then cleaning up after an application. I know this is common sense, but a lot of people don't understand. You have to clean up after an application. You have to make sure that anything that's done during an application, any oversprays or anything like that, are cleaned up. Don't leave a mess. If you leave a mess, it's just going to lead to future problems that you or your company are not going to want to deal with. The next important part of our process is going to be selecting the pesticide. Choosing the right pesticide for your particular situation is critical to determine whether the pesticide can be used safely under the application conditions. You also need to determine how much product is required for the area you are treating. Now, before we even go out and purchase or apply the pesticide, we need to read the label to determine the safety measures to follow, where you can legally use it, i.e., target sites, when to apply it, considering factors such as the life cycle of the pest, weather conditions, pre-harvest, and/or grazing interval, and the rotational or replanting interval. As we've been discussing, you need to think about what safety measures do I need to follow. Looking at a label without telling you what the product is, this label told us applicators must wear the following: long sleeve shirt and long pants, shoes plus socks, and chemical resistant gloves. Before purchasing or applying the pesticide, read the label to determine how to apply it, e.g. selecting and setting up equipment, following label directions. Also, if there are any special use restrictions, e.g. restricted entry intervals or prohibitions against certain types of application methods or equipment, and whether there are restrictions, e.g. environmental conditions, setbacks or buffers, and drift warnings. Some labels require you to add an adjuvant or additive to the spray mixture to improve mixing or application or to enhance pesticidal performance. Reviewing the pesticide label. It is important to review the label carefully and to apply the pesticide as directed on the product label. The directions for use section lists the various crops, animals, or sites on which you may legally use the pesticide. Under this subheading, the label lists target pest, application rates, spray quality or droplet size specifications, and general application methods. You should also consult the label on spray or clean out, as well as proper storage and disposal of pesticide and empty containers. Now let's take a look at the directions for use on a label we selected. The first thing I see on this label is the wording. It is a violation to use this product in any manner inconsistent with its labeling. So as we all understand at this point in our core trainings, the label is going to be the law. This is once again just telling us if you use this product in any manner inconsistent with that labeling, you are in violation of the federal law. The next statement in our directions for use section says, do not apply this product in a way that will contact workers or any other persons either directly or indirectly through drift. We need to think about a couple things at that point. Are there other people in the area? Is there wind outside? What is the speed of the wind? All these factors are going to play when it comes to figuring out if this product's going to drift and whom it may affect if it does drift. In our next line under directions for use, you see agricultural use requirements. It says, use this product in accordance with its labeling and Worker Protection Standard 40 CFR Part 170. Once again, now it's telling us in the directions for use, especially when it comes to agricultural use, we have to use this product in accordance with that Worker Protection Standard 40 CFR Part 170. I'm not going to go over that in this course. You can look that up later. I just want you to understand what you're going to see in these directions for use areas and what you're going to need to read further in the future. Now that the labels introduce this standard, you need to know this standard contains requirements for the protection of agricultural workers on farms, forests, nurseries, and greenhouses, and handlers of agricultural pesticides. So they introduced the Worker Protection Standard. Now they're letting you know who it covers on this label. The next thing the label tells us in the directions for use is do not enter or allow worker entry into treated areas during the restricted entry interval REI for 4 hours. This lets us know that no workers can go back into that area during this restricted entry interval or REI for 4 hours. Just remember, REI is always going to mean restricted entry interval, and you always want to know what amount of time has to pass before workers can re-enter an area if anything is listed on the label as far as an REI goes. Next thing we need to think about is determining pesticide compatibility. Tank mixing 2 or more pesticides saves time and labor. In some cases, however, it can impair the effectiveness of 1 or more of the products. For this reason, you should determine the compatibility of your products before mixing them. Pesticides are compatible when they can be mixed and applied in combination without reducing the effectiveness or changing the physical and chemical properties of the mixture. When problems develop from mixing two or more products together, the chemicals are incompatible. I guess we're going back to chemistry class like you did in school, but you have to think about it. You can't mix two products that are incompatible. Just make sure as you're going back and looking at these labels, look at the additives that may need to be added to a product and make sure what the compatibility is, as well as if you're going to mix two products together, you have to make sure they're compatible as well. So this could be two different products, even two different modes of actions, two different ways they work, but you have to make sure they're compatible. Do not mix two products together that do not have compatibility. That leads us to another great question. What are the two main types of incompatibility? There are two main types of incompatibility, physical and chemical. With physical incompatibility, this is the failure of pesticide products to stay uniformly mixed in the spray tank. Physical incompatibility may result in putty or paste formation, a separation into layers, or a mixture that looks like cottage cheese, or it precipitates. This mixture may clog screens and nozzles and will not control target pest. Physical incompatibility may be caused by improper mixing procedures, or inadequate agitation, or lack of stable emulsifiers and some emulsifiable concentrates, or mixing with liquid fertilizers, or mixing pesticides with hard water, a pH greater than 7. Physical incompatibility results in an unsprayable mixture, in this case, excessive foaming. Chemical incompatibility occurs when mixing certain pesticides in the spray tank alters the activity of one or more of them. In other words, a chemical reaction takes place and produces new substances. Clues indicating chemical incompatibility may include heat, a color change, the formation of a gas or a precipitate, the appearance of surface gum or foam, or the formation of gel or sludge. The resulting mixture is different from the products applied separately. I just want to take another moment to talk about physical incompatibility and chemical incompatibility. Starting with physical incompatibility, you need to understand that the signs include a formation of a putty or a paste, or a mixture that looks like cottage cheese or precipitates. Now, when you look at pesticides in the future and you see either one of these, you're going to understand exactly what's happening, that this is a physical incompatibility. Now, as we've been talking about, you're going to need a good understanding of chemical incompatibility as well. Clues indicating chemical incompatibility may include heat, a color change, the formation of a gas or precipitate, the appearance of surface gum or foam, the formation of gel or sludge. There are two types of chemical incompatibility. In the first type, the pesticidal activity of at least one of the components is reduced when two or more products are mixed. In the second type, the activity of two or more products applied together may be greater than if each pesticide were applied separately. This added effectiveness may weaken the selective nature of the individual products and damage target plants. Some pesticide product labels do a jar test with a small amount of the mixture before you mix a large quantity. That's something you may want to remember real quick, that jar test. Just remember, sometimes on the labels you'll see you can do a jar test to mix a small amount of the mixture before you mix a large quantity, just to make sure there's no chemical incompatibility of two different products. Remember, it is illegal to mix pesticides with other products, e.g. other pesticides, adjuvants or carriers, when such mixtures are expressly prohibited on the label. Also, if a tank mix contains a pesticide that has a higher toxicity level, e.g. danger, than the other pesticides, e.g. warning or caution, treat the entire mixture according to the more restrictive signal word, e.g. as a danger pesticide. You must use the required safety equipment and follow all other label requirements found on the label with the greatest restrictions. To conduct a jar compatibility test, use a small glass or plastic container. Mix proportionate amounts of the carrier and products you intend to combine in the spray tank. Start by filling the jar 1/5 to 1/2 full with the carrier, water or liquid fertilizer. Then, add proportionate amounts of each product, one at a time. Shake the jar thoroughly after each product is added. Allow the mixture to stand for 10 to 15 minutes. If flakes, sludge, gel, precipitates, or other solids form, the products, pesticides, and other chemicals are incompatible with that formulation. Many have very helpful tank mixing instructions. If you cannot find information about tank mixing and one or more of the products you wish to combine, separate into layers, or heat is given off, the products cannot be safely tank mixed. Adding compatibility agents may improve the mixing of the ingredients. Certain kits can help you test for compatibility. There are also online sources, as well as smartphone apps, to help you determine the proper mixing order for various tank mix components. Making tank mixes. To minimize compatibility problems with tank mixes, follow correct mixing procedures. Add and thoroughly mix the products, one at a time, beginning with those hardest to mix. To ensure thorough mixing of dry formulations, before adding them to the mixture, make a pre-slurry mix. Then, mix the products with a little water to form a paste before adding them to the tank mix. To be certain you always have a uniform spray mixture, keep the mixture agitated during the entire application until the tank is empty. Okay, as many of you probably know if you've taken any of our core trainings, we talk a lot about things that are very important and things that may be on core exams. I can tell you when it comes to tank mixing order, most core exams have something about this. I can't tell you how many states I've taken core exams in, and you see things that talk about tank mixing order. So let's talk about what is a good tank mixing order. First, we would need to fill the tank 1/5 full to 1/2 full with carrier, e.g. water or liquid fertilizer. So basically, we're going to start with water or liquid fertilizer. We're going to need to fill that tank 1/5 to 1/2 full with that carrier. Number 2, we need to add compatibility agent if needed. So sometimes we might use a compatibility agent. If we need to do that, that needs to be our second step. Third, we would add suspension products. First, we would add dry formulations or wettable powders, dry flowables, and finally water dispersible granules as a pre-slurry if needed. Fourth, we would add solution products, solutions or soluble powders. Fifth, we would add surfactants and other adjuvants if needed. And sixth, finally, we would add emulsion products, emulsifiable concentrates. This gives you a really good idea of a tank mixing order and will help you as you're out mixing pesticides as well as passing core exams. Following safe mixing and loading practices. People who mix and load concentrated pesticides have an especially high risk of accidental exposure and poisoning. Observe the following precautions to reduce the risk involved with this part of the job. Select an appropriate mixing and loading area. Locate the pesticide mixing and loading area in a well-ventilated, if indoors, well-lighted place away from people, animals, food, and other items that might be contaminated. Use personal protective equipment. Face protection. Wear a face shield to keep splashes and dust off your face, nose, and mouth while pouring liquid pesticides or adding dry pesticides to a liquid. Respiratory protection. Wear the appropriate respirator when handling pesticides. Choose one with the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, NIOSH, code given on the pesticide product label. Eye protection. Wear shielded safety glasses, goggles, or a face shield to protect your eyes. I want everybody to remember what we just talked about. When it comes to personal protective equipment and you think about face protection, always wearing a face shield is going to be better when you're mixing or loading pesticides. And we talked about it's going to help keep splashes and dust off your face, nose, and mouth. keeping in mind that that full face shield is going to be much better than safety glasses. You're always going to read the label anyways, but just remember, you can go above and beyond the label if it makes you feel more safe, and ultimately it's going to keep you more safe. When it comes to respiratory protection, you're always going to want to choose a NIOSH respirator. There's going to be a code on each pesticide label showing which NIOSH code you need. So you'll see codes like NIOSH N95 respirators, but just make sure you read the label and understand which NIOSH respirator is approved for that product. When it comes to eye protection, obviously you can wear shielded safety glasses or goggles, but just keeping in mind you still need to wear that face shield to fully protect your eyes. I'm always going to tell you, when mixing or loading, just wear that face shield and make sure you keep yourself out of harm's way. We need to note that we have to open containers carefully. Do not tear open paper or cardboard containers. Use a sharp knife or scissors. This reduces the danger of spilling and makes bags easier to close after use. Clean the knife or scissors afterwards and do not use them for other purposes. To prevent spills, close containers after each use, even if you plan to mix more of the same pesticide. And I just want to say one thing here. When we're using a sharp knife or scissors, make sure we just cut open the box, but do not cut into the materials. It can be very easy to cut into the bags or cut through plastic containers, so just make sure you don't go too deep and that you do just cut the cardboard box on the outside. We need to make sure we measure accurately. Liquids and some granular pesticides are measured by volume, dust, powders, and most dry formulations are measured by weight. Pesticide labels use the English system of measurement, i.e. fluid ounces, pints, quarts, and gallons for liquids, pounds and ounces for dry materials. Use an assortment of glass or plastic measuring utensils from 1 cup to 1 gallon to accurately measure liquids. Measure accurately. Some pesticides react with metal, especially aluminum and iron, so avoid using metal measuring utensils. Use an accurate scale and a set of measuring cups and spoons to measure and weigh dry pesticides. Mark each pesticide measuring item clearly to avoid using it for other purposes. To prevent accidental poisonings, paint handles with brightly colored waterproof paint or attach waterproof warning labels. After each use, clean and wash utensils before storing them to prevent contaminating future mixtures. When you are not using them, keep all measuring and weighing equipment and utensils locked in the pesticide storage area. I think you're getting the idea of how to measure pesticides here. Keep in mind that last line. When not using these measuring and weighing devices and utensils, keep them locked in the pesticide storage area. So remember, these are just like any other restricted use pesticide. Once you've poured a liquid formulation into a measuring cup or something like that, somebody could come into contact with that. So we have to treat this just like we would any other pesticide. We need to remember to transfer pesticides carefully. After measuring or weighing the correct amount of pesticide, carefully add it to the partially filled spray tank. When pouring, keep the container and pesticide below face level. If there is a breeze outdoors or strong air current indoors, stand so the pesticide cannot blow back on you. Rinse the measuring container thoroughly and pour the rinse aid into the spray tank. Use caution when rinsing to prevent splashing. Never leave the spray tank unattended while it is being filled. When transferring wettable powders, dust, or other dry formulations, avoid spillage and inhalation of dust. You have to remember, after measuring or weighing the correct amount of pesticide, we're going to carefully add it to the partially filled spray tank. So we already talked about mixing pesticides and formulas earlier, so just keep in mind you have to follow that exact order we spoke about. Another great point we brought up here is keeping the container and pesticide below face level. You want to keep things below face level. The last thing you want to do is worry about something splashing up onto your face or the wind blowing it on your face. I told you earlier you need to wear a face shield anyways, But keep in mind, if you're doing things at face level, you're always going to have that risk of something splashing onto you more than if it's below face level. After we mix our pesticides, rinse the measuring container thoroughly and pour the rinsate into the spray tank. This is pretty common on labels anyways, but I just want you to know you need to rinse that measuring container, because if not, it's just pesticides out there in the open. A big one for me is, especially with people that use big tanks like 50, 100, and 500 gallon tanks, is leaving that tank unattended while it's being filled. How often have I seen somebody take a garden hose, hook it up to their spray tank, and then while it's being filled, just walk away for 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how big the tank is. This is one of the worst things you can do. When I've seen pesticide spills, I can tell you, as much as any other time, it's been because guys will go, they'll fill up a spray tank, they'll put all their mixtures in there, and then they'll walk off and let the water run, and nobody realizes what's happening until you see water coming out of the back of the vehicle with pesticides mixed in it. This is a major problem. It's been a problem in all my years in the industry, and it's one of the easiest mistakes to make, and you don't want to do that. Finally, when we talk about transferring wettable powders, dust, or other dry formulations, we've got another big problem here with spillage and inhalation of dust. These dusts, once you spill them, once they come out of a bag, once they come out of a container, they're going to go airborne, and it's really easy to breathe them. So we have to be very careful when transferring these wettable powders, dust, and other dry formulations to make sure the containers are in good working order. Make sure none of the bags are ripped, none of the plastic containers are ripped, because if they are, those dusts are going to come up, and unfortunately, you're going to inhale some of that at some point. Cleaning and disposing of pesticide containers. Follow the container handling instructions on the pesticide label. The instructions will tell you how to clean and dispose of an empty container. Not all containers must be triple rinsed or pressure rinsed. If rinsing is required, follow the directions on the label and rinse immediately after emptying the container. Otherwise, residues may become difficult to remove if allowed to dry. If possible, add the rinsate to the next application. Do not leave pesticide containers unattended at a mixing, loading, or application site. Return them to a secured storage area until they can be recycled or disposed of properly. Clearly mark and safely store them. Follow the label directions on what to do with an empty container. If a pesticide label says it is a refillable container, it will have instructions to return the container to the pesticide dealer or manufacturer for refilling. Never tamper with a container designed to be returned and refilled. If it is a non-refillable container, the label will tell you whether you can recycle, recondition, or dispose of the container and the manner of disposal. Never reuse pesticide containers. Common sense. Never leave pesticide containers unattended at a mixing, loading, or application site. This is just 101 on storage of pesticides. Now remember, whenever you have a container that's been emptied, they need to be put in a secured storage area until they can be recycled or disposed of properly. The point I'm making here is, don't go around with a bunch of empty containers in the back of your truck that are just rolling around that could blow out with the wind or somebody could get their hands on. Make sure they're secured and then take them back to a storage area. Make sure to follow all instructions from the label on rinsing the container or cleaning it as you need to. Then make sure you dispose of it correctly according to those label instructions. If recycling is an option, check with your state, tribe, or territory pesticide regulatory agency or the Ag Container Recycling Council, www.acrecycle.org or 877-952-2272 to locate a pesticide container recycling program. Container rinsing procedures. For small containers, 5 gallons or less, triple rinse as follows. Empty the remaining contents into application equipment or a mixed tank. Drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip. Fill the container 1/4 full with water and recap. Shake for 10 seconds. Pour rinseate into application equipment or a mixed tank, or store rinseate for later use or disposal. Drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip. Repeat this procedure 2 more times. This triple rinse procedure is one of the most important things in the pesticide industry. You need to know and understand this triple rinse procedure because you're going to do this over and over and over again throughout your career in pesticide handling and use. In step 1, we're going to empty the remaining contents into application equipment or a mixed tank. Drain for about 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip. So I'm going back over this for a specific reason. You have to memorize these steps. Do I think you're going to read the label every time you go out to look at the triple rinse procedure? I don't. That's why I'm telling you to remember it. And as far as core exam prep goes, these are going to be on core exams everywhere you go. So keep in mind what step 1 is, and then we're going to walk our way all the way through this triple rinse procedure. In step 2, we're going to fill the container 1/4 full with water and recap. Then we're going to shake it for 10 seconds. In step 3 of our triple rinse procedure, we're going to pour rinseate into application equipment or a mixed tank or store rinseate for later use or disposal. In step 4 of our triple rinse procedure, we're going to drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip. As the final step in our triple rinse procedure, step 5 is going to be repeating this procedure 2 more times. This is why it's called the triple rinse procedure, because in essence we're doing the same thing 3 times, which makes it a triple rinse procedure. For containers too large to shake, i.e. with capacities more than 5 gallons or 50 pounds, triple rinse as follows. Empty the remaining contents into application equipment or a mixed tank. Fill the container 1/4 full with water. Replace and tighten closures. Tip container on its side and roll it back and forth, making at least 1 complete revolution for 30 seconds. Stand the container on its end and tip it back and forth several times. Turn the container over onto its other end and tip back and forth several times. Empty the rinseate into application equipment or a mixed tank, or store rinseate later for use or disposal. Repeat this procedure 2 more times. For bags or liners, completely empty bag or liner by shaking and tapping sides and bottom to loosen clinging particles. Empty residue into application equipment or a mixed tank, or store for later use or disposal. To pressure rinse containers, empty the remaining contents into application equipment or a mixed tank. Drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip. Hold container upside down over application equipment or a mixed tank, or collect rinseate for later use or disposal. Insert pressure rinsing nozzle in the side of the container and rinse at about 40 pounds per square inch for at least 30 seconds. Drain for 10 seconds after the flow begins to drip. Applying pesticides correctly. Applicators have many important responsibilities when applying pesticides, protecting themselves, others, and the environment, and making sure the pesticide is applied correctly. This means using proper PPE and following correct application procedures. Personal protective equipment. By law, applicators must wear the PPE and other clothing the pesticide labeling requires. Consider using additional protection for some types of pesticide application tasks. Hand-carried and backpack applications. Exposure is quite likely when applying pesticides using handheld equipment or dust shakers. Dripping or partially clogged nozzles, leaky hoses, and loose equipment connections are other potential sources of exposure. Many applications performed on foot cause the applicator to walk into the path of a pesticide application. Whenever possible, apply pesticide so you are backing out of the treated area. If you must walk into the path of the pesticide, consider wearing shin-high or knee-high rubber boots or other protective footwear with spray-resistant or waterproof pants. Wear appropriate protective clothing and equipment when entering treated areas to fix clogged nozzles or other malfunctioning equipment parts. I want to mention this is a big mistake that a lot of people in the industry do. People will go out and because they weren't the one maybe putting out the pesticide, they'll enter a treated area without the correct PPE. So when you go into a treated area to fix clogged nozzles or malfunctioning equipment parts, make sure you're wearing the correct PPE. Just because you're not doing an application doesn't mean you can't be exposed to the pesticides. On the contrary, I would say most of the times I was exposed was really more so when I was doing something like this. When I first started, I would have a leak on my B&G handle. Well, I would just start fixing it with the product leaking. Well, guess what? That was being absorbed right into my skin. Now, as I got in the industry and was there longer, I started to understand I got to be careful, even when I'm working on equipment, to make sure I don't absorb the product. High exposure applications. Certain types of pesticide applications are especially risky because they may expose the applicator to large amounts of pesticide. These include mist blower or air blast sprayers, aerosol and fog generators, high-pressure sprayers and power dusters, equipment that directs applications overhead, such as to tree canopies or roof eaves. I'll be the first one to tell you these are some of the times where you risk exposure the most. When you're using mist blowers and air blasters or aerosol and fog generators, you're putting out a lot of product. That means there's a lot of chance that you could absorb some of that product. So we need to be especially careful at these times. These high-pressure sprayers, power dusters, it's not just like you're using a puff duster in your hand. You're using a power duster that's really going to be kicking that dust out. That makes it even more important that you're following the label and wearing that correct PPE. Also, when you're using any equipment that directs applications overhead, like tree canopies or roof eaves, you completely understand. You're spraying overhead, what goes up must come down. That product will come down on you, so you better make sure you have all the PPE. And at that point, I would say definitely a face shield to go with it, but always follow the label. I'm just saying more is better in this case, and as much as if you wear more PPE than the label requires, you're going to be better off in the long run. Pesticide exposure is likely whenever you are working in these situations. For high exposure applications, use appropriate gloves, protective coveralls with a hood, footwear with sealed cuffs, and a full face respirator or half face respirator with sealed goggles. Pesticides are sometimes applied in enclosed spaces, such as warehouses, factories, restaurants, and homes, rail cars, ship and truck cargo areas, silos, elevators, and other grain storage areas, and greenhouses. This increases the risk of inhalation and dermal exposure. Wear an approved respirator and additional protective clothing even if you would not need them for the same application outdoors. Keep in mind, when you're doing a pesticide application in an enclosed space, that's going to really increase the risk of inhalation and dermal exposure. So we need to be especially careful when we're in these enclosed spaces and make sure we're really up to par on the PPE we should wear. Application procedures. To ensure that pesticides are being applied properly, follow these basic procedures. 1. Before applying a pesticide, clear all people and pets from the area. Remove toys and pet dishes from the application area and cover garden furniture, swimming pools, and bird baths. Even for narrowly directed pesticide applications, such as crack and crevice treatments, keep people and animals out of the immediate area during the application. Check the pesticide label to find out when it is safe to return to the application area. If the label does not include specific restricted entry statements, keep people and non-target animals out of the treated area until the spray is dried or the dust has settled. Again, with application procedures, to ensure that pesticides are being applied properly, follow these basic procedures. 2. Ensure that the pesticide is reaching the target surface or area. Be sure to remove granules from sidewalks and other non-target areas. 3. Apply the pesticide evenly and in the correct amounts. Do not allow liquid pesticides to form puddles or dry pesticides to pile up in the application area. Be especially careful in places where you turn or pause your equipment. You may have to shut off your equipment in these areas. After applying the pesticide to the first part of the target site, check to be sure the right amount of pesticide has been used. There's a couple important things we're saying here. Make sure your pesticide reaches that target surface or area. Also, remove granules or any pesticide residues from areas like sidewalks. You don't want to leave granules all over sidewalks, especially when the label on a product like that says put it in grassy areas or flower beds. Whatever the case is, you don't just want to leave granules on sidewalks. You're going to have a laundry list of issues from the customers and other things if you do that. Applying the product evenly and in the correct amounts is very important. If anybody's ever done things like fertilizing lawns or done weed treatments in lawns, you may know this. If you get too much in what area, what happens? You can burn that lawn up. And I'm just mentioning that in lawn care, but when it comes to pesticides and pest control, same thing. If you get too much of the product in one area, it's not going to be effective. The insects are going to avoid it. It's just not something you want to do. So make sure you're getting the correct amounts of the pesticides in the right areas, and you're cleaning up if there's any oversprays or residues. Application procedures to ensure that pesticides are being applied properly. Follow these basic procedures. 4. Ensure that the pesticide maintains a uniform mix or appearance during the application. Several pesticide formulations mixed with liquid require agitation to remain in suspension. Granules and dust should appear dry and not form clumps on the target site. Check hoses, valves, nozzles, hoppers, and other equipment parts often during the application. Something that I always think is really important, any products that have on the label that they require agitation to remain in suspension, you have to make sure you agitate that product. Sometimes you might be using something like a hand sprayer, and you're going to have to regularly shake it up and down a few times to keep that constant agitation. When it comes to these granules and dust, make sure they appear dry. So if you're going into your bag and you're going to put some granules into a spreader and they're all clumped up, what does that really tell you? The moisture has affected them. The integrity of that product's gone, and it's really not going to be effective at that point. When it comes to checking hoses, valves, nozzles, hoppers, and other equipment, always look at these hoses. I can tell you when it comes to doing applications for termites, when it comes to doing lawn spraying especially, these high-powered rigs can be a major problem. A hose clamp can come loose, a hose can split. Whatever happens, that product can start spraying out in a pin stream, or the whole hose can blow off, and then you'll just see a stream coming out of your vehicle, probably going to the nearest drain or ditch around your vehicle, and then you've got a major pesticide spill, and you've really got a problem on your hands. Application procedures to ensure that pesticides are being applied properly. Follow these basic procedures. Number 6. Turn spray equipment off when you pause for any reason. Agitation must be maintained if the spray mix is a suspension of particles such as wettable powders, flowables, or dry flowable formulations. Whenever you stop an application, depressurize spray tanks. Turn off the main pressure valve on the tank and release the pressure remaining at the nozzles. Number 7. Check the label for any post-application requirements, such as incorporating the pesticide into the soil. Obviously, common sense, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. Whenever you pause or stop an application, turn off the spray equipment. Do not allow it to keep running. Do not put yourself in the position where you can't have a leak, you can't have a hose blow off and you've walked away. This doesn't make any sense at all. Now obviously we talked about here, if you've got a suspension of particles such as wettable powders, flowables, or dry flowable formulations, if you turn equipment off, or even while you're using it, you have to make sure these things stay agitated. So of course, when you pause an application or turn the equipment off, understand you're going to have to agitate those products again. One last thing I'll mention here on number 7, check the label for any post-application requirements, such as incorporating the pesticide into the soil. I would say that would be more of a termite application, where you remove soil from a trench and then you have to treat the soil you're putting back in that trench. Because if you don't, you're going to have a section of area that doesn't have any of the termiticide in it. Doesn't make any sense to dig a trench, put termiticide down in a trench, and then put soil back in the trench that doesn't have any of the active product in it. That's an example of incorporating the pesticide into the soil. Cleaning up after mixing, loading, and application. After mixing, loading, or applying a pesticide, clean the pesticide equipment and yourself thoroughly. While the facts are still fresh in your mind, record all information about the application to comply with pesticide record-keeping laws. Do not leave equipment containing pesticides at the mixing and loading or application sites. Avoid washing equipment repeatedly in the same location unless you have a containment pad or tray. Again, some common sense things here. Always clean the pesticide equipment and yourself. And then make sure, while the facts are still fresh in your mind, you do all the treatment records you need to. Don't think you're going to do this all at the end of the day after you've made multiple applications. You'll never remember what products you used and how much you used of them. I've seen this happen so many times where technicians won't do their paperwork while they're on site and they get in trouble and then they just make something up at the end of the day to check out their tickets. Of course, we're not going to leave any equipment containing pesticides in the mixing, loading, or application sites, and avoid washing repeatedly in the same site your equipment. If you do that, the pesticides can build up in that general area. That would basically be like another over-application that could lead to runoff. Cleaning up after mixing, loading, and application. Instruct everyone who cleans pesticide-contaminated equipment on proper safety procedures. Equipment cleaning presents as great a risk of pesticide exposure as do many other pesticide handling tasks. When cleaning pesticide-contaminated equipment, wear the same PPE that the labeling requires for making applications, plus a chemical-resistant apron or other appropriate protective equipment. Consider wearing eye protection, even if not required by the label. Cleaning procedures. After the equipment is empty, clean both inside and outside thoroughly, including nozzles or hopper openings. Certain pesticides, e.g. petroleum-based products, use a carrier that may require special cleaning agents or high water pressure to get the equipment clean. Let's talk about rinse aids. Rinse aids from equipment that has been cleaned contain pesticides and can harm people and the environment. Do not allow rinse aids to flow into water systems, including sink or floor drains, storm sewers, wells, streams, lakes, or rivers. If possible, rinse your equipment at the application site. Also, collect and apply rinse aids to labeled sites at or below label rates. Basic knowledge here. Obviously, we don't want rinse aids to get into water systems. Don't let them go down sink or floor drains. This is a real common thing. I've seen people pour them down sinks and things like that. Obviously, all that water's going somewhere and it ends up in the streams, lakes, and rivers. Now, you're always going to want to rinse your equipment at the application site as much as possible. Also, collect and apply rinse aids to labeled sites at or below labeled rates. It's a good idea while you're at the application site to go ahead and use your rinse aids as well. Don't over apply. You need to think about it when you're doing your application. There's going to be some rinse aids, and if at all possible, go ahead and use them on that labeled site where you're at. Equipment rinse aid may also be used as a diluent for future pesticide mixtures, provided the pesticide in the rinse aid is labeled for use on the target site where the new mixture will be applied. Amount of pesticide in the rinse aid plus the amount of pesticide product in the new mixture does not exceed the label rate for the target site. Rinse aid is used to dilute a mixture containing the same or a compatible pesticide. Rinse aid may not be added to a pesticide mixture if it contain strong cleaning agents such as bleach or ammonia that might harm the plant, animal, or surface to which the pesticide will be applied, or would alter the pesticide mixture and make it unusable. For example, if the pesticides are physically or chemically incompatible. If rinsates cannot be used, dispose of them according to the label as you would waste products. Pretty straightforward stuff here. Anytime any of your rinsates contain strong cleaning agents such as a bleach or ammonia, this might harm plants or animals or surfaces to which the pesticide would be applied, so obviously we're not going to add it to a pesticide mixture. And we need to understand if anything's happened to those rinsates that would alter the future pesticide mixture and make it unusable, we definitely don't want to use it. This could mean the pesticides are going to become physically or chemically incompatible. Also, if these rinsates cannot be used, you have to dispose of them according to the label as you would waste products. Read that label, understand how to dispose of these, and dispose of them as you would waste pesticides. When it comes to equipment cleanup, clean your equipment thoroughly after each use or when changing chemicals. Pesticide residues can corrode metal, plug hoses, or damage pumps and valves unless removed immediately after use. Sometimes residues react with pesticides used later, reducing the effectiveness of the pesticides. Special tank cleaning nozzles are available to clean the interior walls of spray tanks. I'll give you a quick scenario as to why this is so important. Maybe you're using a repellent product when you're at a site. You're going out, you're doing a treatment for general insects, you're putting a repellent around the perimeter of a property. Let's say at the next property you're having an ant problem, so now we're dealing with a colonizing insect and we want a non-repellent. You have to make sure you wash out that sprayer before you put out the non-repellent product. If you've still got residues of that repellent product in there, you're going to defeat your purpose at the next account where you're trying to use a non-repellent. There's an old expression in the industry where people will talk about this. It's called a dirty B&G. I had a repellent product in my sprayer. I didn't change it. I put a non-repellent in there. Now I have a dirty B&G, which means I'm going to defeat my purpose as we just talked about a moment ago. For all application scenarios, make sure the entire spray system is clean, not just the tank. This is especially true for commercial row crop boom sprayers. Besides the spray tank, problem spots for pesticide contamination include the sometimes called an inductor, plumbing, which includes valves and hoses, filters and screens, boom segments, nozzle bodies, and nozzles and screens. One quick thing on this. Make sure you clean out your nozzles and your screens and any filters in your sprayers. If you don't do this, you're not going to get good flow of the pesticides, you're not going to get equal applications, and you're not going to get the outcomes you want when treating with products. When possible, thoroughly rinse equipment with a strong water detergent solution, 8 to 16 ounces of detergent, and 30 to 40 gallons of water. Allow the water detergent solution to circulate through the system for several minutes. Remove the nozzles and screens, then flush the sprayer system twice with clean water. Some pesticide labels may require triple rinsing to rid the spray system of any possible pesticide contamination. Regardless of how the spray system is cleaned, make sure all visible deposits are removed. Sloppy cleanup practices are one of the main causes of equipment failure or malfunction. Pesticides allowed to dry in the application equipment tend to clump and stick and cannot be easily removed. These deposits may eventually dissolve into the spray solution. Thus, improper cleanout may lead to contamination of tank mixes and damage to susceptible crops. Several commercial compounds will aid in tank cleaning. These can neutralize and remove pesticide residues, remove mineral deposits and rust, and leave a protective film on the tank walls to help prevent corrosion. When preparing to store your sprayer, add 1 to 5 gallons of lightweight oil, depending on the size of the tank, before the final flushing. As water is pumped from the sprayer, the oil leaves a protective coating on the inside of the tank, pump, and plumbing. To prevent corrosion, remove nozzle tips and screens and store them in a can of light oil, such as diesel fuel or kerosene. In addition, add a small amount of oil and rotate the pump 4 to 5 revolutions by hand to coat interior surfaces completely. It may be necessary to winterize the spray system to prevent damage from freezing temperatures. Be sure to either drain all water from the spray system or replace the water in the pump and other critical parts with an antifreeze material. RV antifreeze is commonly used. After thoroughly cleaning and draining the equipment, store it in a dry, clean building. Replace worn out, deteriorated, or broken parts. If you store the sprayer outside, remove the hoses, wipe them clean of oil, and store them inside where they will not become damaged. When using trailer sprayers, you may want to put blocks under the frame or axle to reduce tire pressure during storage. As with any pesticide-related procedure, remove contaminated clothes and take a shower immediately after cleaning equipment. Waiting until the end of the day to clean up may allow additional absorption of the pesticide through the skin. We need to think about professionalism. As a pesticide applicator, you do important work and provide valuable services. These services include producing a safe and plentiful food and fiber supply, protecting public health from vector-borne diseases, creating value for property owners through their landscapes and structures, protecting land and water ecosystems from invasive species, enhancing the public's quality of life through parks and other recreation venues, creating safe roadways and other rights of way. So far, we have covered how to safely, properly, and effectively manage pests and use application equipment. Another consideration is your professionalism as a pesticide applicator. What you do and how well you handle yourself while on the job will leave an impression on others. These expectations of conduct and your actions in specific situations create your professional image, best summed up as professionalism. What is professionalism? Merriam-Webster defines professionalism as the skill, good judgment, and polite behavior that is expected from a person who is trained to do a job well. The heart of professionalism for a pesticide applicator is exercising good judgment when there are no clear-cut right or wrong options. Professionalism includes fair treatment of customers, respect for others, and being an asset to your community. While regulatory compliance is necessary, you as an applicator or a supervisor will need the expertise and good judgment to make decisions on issues affecting security, safety, health, or the environment not addressed by regulations or the pesticide label. You should study to help you acquire the basic knowledge needed to educate your customers and others who are concerned about pesticides. Educate others about the work you do. Know how to minimize risks to yourself, co-workers, the public, and the environment. Learn how to communicate the benefits and risk of pesticide use with your customers, co-workers, and the public. The impression you make on others depends on your ability to answer questions from customers, neighbors, and others about the work you do. Demonstrate professional ethical standards. A professional demonstrates ethical behavior in all aspects of his or her work. This means not taking shortcuts that may harm your customers, the public, or the environment. Offer honest and knowledgeable advice, keeping in mind the best interest of others. Integrated pest management is also part of your professional training because it helps you make sound pest management decisions, apply pesticides only when needed, and protect sensitive sites from harm. Communicate with customers, neighbors, and the public. Being a professional involves knowing the correct terminology when discussing your work and communicating with others. When speaking with the public, it is better to use simple, direct language than to use technical jargon. Be proactive and reach out to neighbors, customers, and others who may have concerns about a nearby sensitive site when you are applying pesticides. Inform others that you are a professionally certified and trained pesticide applicator. Explain what that means because many people will not know. Be familiar with your company or organization policy for talking to customers, neighbors, or the media. Keep accurate records of all your pesticide applications. Good records provide the facts of what you did and demonstrate your care in the work you do. If there is a complaint or legal action following an application, having good records may be your most valuable defense. Having no or insufficient records makes you vulnerable to baseless accusations and additional scrutiny. In a nutshell, being an effective pesticide applicator is more than just the skills and knowledge needed to conduct an application. It also requires good judgment, polite behavior, and a professional demeanor. Summary: applying pesticides correctly requires careful planning, especially when making tank mixes. Pesticide labels do not always specify whether products can be tank mixed. Therefore, applicators must know how to conduct a compatibility test to determine which products can be safely mixed. Safe mixing and loading practices include selecting an appropriate mixing and loading area, protecting water sources, and using appropriate PPE. Rinsable containers must be triple or pressure rinsed, properly disposed of, or recycled. Empty non-rinsable containers as completely as possible before disposing of, recycling, or refilling them. When applying pesticides, protect yourself and the environment by wearing appropriate PPE and removing all people and pets, non-target organisms, from the area to be treated. After mixing, loading, and applying pesticides, be sure to clean equipment and yourself properly. If possible, reuse application equipment rinse aids as a diluent in a spray mixture containing the same or a compatible pesticide. Apply rinse aids to a labeled site at or below the label rate. Congratulations, you have completed the course. Please proceed to the exam to receive your credit.